So yeah, hi everyone. Uh, yeah, let me share my screen and I have some bits on a presentation and maybe we can go over it. So yeah, basically, yeah, there we go. You can see these Docker and Kubernetes logos, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Cool. So yeah, basically I'm going to talk about everything that you can do with bits around Docker and Kubernetes. In the past year or so, we have been putting some nice effort on them. And yeah, basically I'm going over all the features that you have on bits, the rest of the stack. And what's the deal with containers? Why are they so different when you are talking about monitoring and logging? So the thing with containers is that when you are using them, the architecture becomes like a moving target. Everything is coming and going. You cannot predict where the things are going to be running, and it's like a very different paradigm from common monitoring use cases with like old infrastructure where all the services were pre-static. In this case, you need specific tools like to track all the containers that are coming and going and to detect things. And today I'm going to talk about a set of things that we have put in bits and that will help you on these tasks when using containers. You can think of this as a toolbox or different things, and you can use all of them or only a few, depending on your use case. And yeah, this is taken from Elasticon. That's why you see that in the bottom. Uh, so first of all, uh, we have a couple of modules on MetricBit, so you can monitor what's actually going on in your Docker layer on the left or in your Kubernetes layer on the right. So when you are doing containers, you need a container runtime that executes all the containers, that runs them, and that will be Docker in this case. And probably you need something to orchestrate them and to tell Docker when and where run things, and that will be Kubernetes in this case. So with these modules, you gain visibility of what's going on. As you can see, you get an idea of what's deployed and how is it performing and so on. We will see this later in a demo if we have time. Then when you are doing logging, the deal here is that you want to get logs from all the running containers. So you get, yeah, you can analyze the logs later on. And Docker writes logs to this folder, var lib Docker containers. Then it takes the container ID and again the container ID and .log, and it writes them using this format that you see in the bottom. It's like a JSON format. So we created a Docker prospector, or now input as we rename it, that is able to understand that format and parse everything and do it like automatically for you transparently. So you don't need to care about that format or JSON and so on. So it does things like taking that log, which is the message, or extracting the timestamp and putting in the events. So you don't need to do these things. We also added metadata processors. We already had some and we added more. The idea of metadata processors is that they allow you to enrich every event that comes from your bit. It may be file bit, metric bit, packet bit, any of them. It allows you to enrich them with useful information that gives you a lot of context about the events that you are seeing. So we have three on the screen: the add cloud metadata, add Docker metadata, and add Kubernetes metadata. All of them are in charge of adding metadata about the different topics that you see. This is really useful when you are later on navigating your metrics, your logs, whatever, to like track things. So if, for instance, I want to focus all my logging research on a specific container, maybe a container version or something, I can do that using the metadata. So it's really useful to correlate this information. Also, if you are like doing metrics and logs or even traces, you can use this metadata to correlate things and say, okay, these metrics belong to these logs. They are both coming from the same container, which is cool. Or if you want to watch full availability zone, for instance, you get a notice from Amazon saying that some availability zone is down, you can use this information to see what's going on with the containers in that availability zone. You can use it to filter and focus on that, which is cool. And this is how an event looks when you use these processors. In this case, we are using the Kubernetes one and the cloud metadata one. And you can see we get, apart from the log message, which is coming from FileBit, we get information about the bit that originated this message, or sorry, the pod, the container. In this case, I see that this is a container called FileBit. The namespace is kube system. I get some labels, and I see that it's running in Google Cloud because the cloud metadata processor tells me so. So as you can see, you get a lot of information for free when just by adding the processors. This is how they work, or specifically the add Kubernetes metadata one. Basically, you don't want to hammer the Kubernetes API every time that you read a log line from a container. So what we do is be in talk with the API server from Kubernetes and be watching for events. Every time that a new pod starts, we add it to an internal table, like in memory cache, and keep like a registry of all the running pods. So when we get the log line from the file, we detect what's the container that from the path of that file. Then we go to this internal table and find the container. Once we find it, take the metadata that the watcher created and enrich the event with it. This way, we don't need to query the API each time. We are just watching for new events. Okay, that's for metadata processors. And I'm sorry because I'm going a little fast, but yeah, many things to tell and to demo. And we'll see all this together later on. So, this is Autodiscover. What's it all about? The idea is that, as I said, when you are using containers, you cannot predict what's going to be running in a single host. So you need like a tool to detect what's going on and react to that. Autodiscover is that tool. What we do is we define an Autodiscover provider that is watching for events on the platform that's minded for. In this case, what you see on the screen is a Docker Autodiscover, and it's able to launch an event every time that a new container starts or stops. Then you can define a set of templates that you want to use on these events or on these to see these containers. And if a template matches the container that started, it launches the configuration for you. I think I have a slide explaining how it works. Yes. Basically, Bits is watching for the events API on Docker. Every time that you launch a container, it creates like an internal structure, which is an Autodiscover event with all the useful information you may want from this container. So you get the host, which is the IP address of the container, the port, if it has some open port, and also metadata about from Docker, like the container ID, the name, the image that it's running, or labels. Then we go to the conditions that you gave us from the config and try to match with these events. In this case, there is a matching condition saying that the image it's etcd, it contains the etcd. So I get the config template that you gave in the Autodiscover config and do a bar expansion. And this is where the magic happens. You give me a configuration template and I'm able to take the information from this single container that just launched and replace the variables that you want on the config template. So in this case, I'm taking the IP address and put it there in a metric bit module. So metric bit is now able to contact that etcd instance. So yeah, it gets replaced and the module is launched. In the same way, when you stop the container, we create like the same event, but saying that it's a stop, and we go over the same process and we stop the module. So you don't need to care about the start, stop. You just do matching and we do the rest. There is also a Kubernetes provider that went out with 6.2. It's exactly the same as the Docker one, but running from Kubernetes events. You can do some magic if you think about it. Like, for instance, use Kubernetes annotations as you have them, or Docker labels if you prefer, if you're running on Docker. As you have them in the Autodiscover event, you can't put them in your config template and or use them as conditions. In this case, we are adding a harvest annotation and we are using it as a condition to launch the Docker prospector. So what this does, in fact, is launching or reading the logs of the containers that have the harvest dot equal to true annotation, and only those. So this is a very good way to limiting what you are ingesting. If you are only interested in the logs of some containers, you can use this to add an annotation and read the logs only from these containers, using the magic of all these templates and conditions. And this is like a sneak peek because it's not out yet. It's going out with 6.3. We are introducing now hints-based auto-discover, which is even more magic. Instead of defining a set of templates based on conditions, you just tell a file bit or metric bit that you want to use hints to define the configuration. What are hints? Hints is like something that allows you to invert the control of how the configuration is defined. Instead of defining the configuration for monitoring or logging in the file bit.yaml, in the bit YAML configuration file, we allow you to define it through labels or annotations next to your container. So somehow this is how it inverts the control. If you have several teams, or maybe it's just you know how to monitor the container that you are about to launch. So why don't you give us the hints that we need as the monitoring platform to monitor it? So what we do is giving you a set of well-known names and saying, hey, see, if you define these labels or annotations in your container, metric bit and file bit will be able to understand that and configure a module or a prospector to get the logs and the metrics from that container. So you don't need to go back to the bits configuration and update it. No need for it. You just label correctly your containers, and then the magic happens. So in this case, you are seeing some logs labels that is telling that this container is running Nginx, and that I want you to use the access file set on the stdout stream and error file set on the stdr stream. Also similar with metrics, if you are running metric bit with hints-based auto-discover, we are telling you to use the Nginx module and attacking this container through this bar expansion that you can still do. So that's everything that you need to get a module working, pointing to your container. So no need to update configuration files or so on. If you want to change these settings, you just update the label and everything is handled for you. As I said, this is not yet released. 6.3 will still happen soon. Let's go now on how you will deploy this and then do a quick demo, which I think it will be really quick. Okay, so one way, or I would say the recommended way to me to launch FileBit and MetricBit when running on container is to run them inside a container, as a container. So the only special thing that you need to do when doing this is mount some things from the host, because the host is what we are trying to monitor. In the case of MetricBit, you want to mount the proc file system inside the MetricBit container, so we get access to several things like processes that are running in the host and so on. In the case of FileBit, we want access to the barley Docker containers folder, because it's there where Docker stores all the logs from the containers running. So FileBit is able to read them and zip them to Elasticsearch or Logstash. if you are running this in Kubernetes, it will go in the same way, but as Kubernetes is a cluster and it has several nodes, you will need to deploy one of the agents per node in the cluster. And in the Kubernetes world, this is done using something called daemon set, and we provide everything in our documentation, but for the Docker and the Kubernetes use case, you go to the docs and we provide all the info you need to launch this. In the case of these daemon sets, we provide all the YAML files that you need to get started really quick. So yeah, if you want to give this a try, I'll recommend going to the docs and fetch these files and see what's explained there. So yeah, let's do a quick demo on this. Yeah, but first of all, let me explain how the demo is going. So I have deployed a demo application in Google Cloud. You can access that URL if you want. Just take into account its bits demo ELSTC. It's not elastic. We removed the vocals because this is something more internal, more hacky. And what we are running there is a simple Python application with a MySQL backend, and yeah, a couple of instances of the same application, which is composed by Python, WView, SGI application plus an Nginx frontend. Everything is load balanced to this service. And yeah, you can access the application. And the idea is that you can use it to submit questions about this talk. So yeah, feel free to use it if you want, but I can also take questions yeah, over Zoom. No need to write them in the application. I'm running this an Elasticsearch and a Kibana in Elastic Cloud, but this could be running in my laptop. I used this because I didn't want to overload my CPU, having that I'm using for the webcam and so on, and it takes a lot of CPU. So yeah, but this could be running anywhere, just for you to know. Okay, and this is how the demo application looks. Yeah, Nicholas already wrote something. So yeah, you can basically submit a question here and they will be around here. No need, it's just a silly thing. No need to do it now. Okay, so let me jump to some manifest files I have to deploy these things, deploy file bit and metric bit in Kubernetes. I have a set of files. This is also published in a repo in my GitHub, so you can check it out. But basically, let's see how we will get logs from the containers running this application. This is very similar to the manifest that we provide in our official docs. I just tweak some things, changing some things for specific to this demo. But this is, as I said, pretty similar to what you will find in our docs. And the first thing that you see is that this is our filebit.yaml. This is like the configuration for filebit. It's just that. I am basically enable Autodiscover using the Kubernetes provider and enable the hints-based Autodiscover. So yeah, I'm cheating a bit because I'm using 6.3 already, although it's not out. It's like an internal snapshot that I'm using. And then I'm enable this processor to add cloud metadata. So all the events that come from filebit, all the logs, have metadata about the cloud they are running on. I get the Kubernetes metadata also for free because if you use Autodiscover, the provider gives you the metadata. You don't need to enable the processor. Okay, so I already launched this, but yeah, let me like remove it and relaunch it again probably so you can see how that works. Yeah, this that I'm doing is just removing filebit from my cluster so I can launch it again, and you see that is like pretty straightforward. In the meanwhile, let's see how I annotated my application to tell filebit through hints that I want it to monitor it. So this is the deployment of my application, and if you see here, I'm adding some annotations to my deployment saying, hey, this contains logs, and I want you to use the Nginx module, and I'm mapping the different file sets of the module to the different streams of the container output. So I'm saying Nginx, and in the standard output, I'm sending the access logs, and in the standard error, I'm sending the error logs. And that's everything that FileBit needs to know how to treat this container. As easy as that. Also, if you don't give any annotations at all, it will basically just ship all the logs from the container without using modules, without doing anything. This is how you create the FileBit daemon set. So this is launching FileBit now. Something to note is that you can use modules here or just the plain prospector to get the logs in raw. But when using modules, if you have the module available, you get processing for the logs, and the result is like structured data from the logs, which is really cool. I'm going to demo now what happens with Nginx when you do that. But you could also want only the raw log, and you could be using hints to define, for instance, the multi-line pattern that you want to use for this container, which is cool. If you're running a mixed set of Java applications with other things, you may want to use like the annotations to set the pattern. Let's go to Kibana, pointing to this cluster. Yeah, we see that we get a lot of logs in the FileBit index, but I can open and focus in one of them only. And as you can see, we get the message here. So I see that I get I get here a message, but I also get a lot of useful information about where this message is coming from. So I see that it's coming from a metric bit. It has these labels. I see that it's the kube system namespace, and so on, and also information about the cloud. Why is this useful? Because I can use this metadata to navigate my information. So for instance, I can get here and add this information to the columns. So if, for instance, I may want to know the pod name that is reporting this line, and maybe also the container name. So here I see the log lines. I see that they are coming from some different metric bits. If you notice this, it's different depending on or FileBit or so on. I don't see many info from Nginx, probably because I just launched this FileBit. But for instance, if I want to focus on all the logs from metric bit, I only need to do that. And having that I have all the logs labeled with this metadata, I can filter to all the metric bit logs. And also, as I have the pod name, instead of having all the metric bits, maybe I only want to focus in one of them because it's giving problems, I can do that too. And this is where the metadata becomes really important and really useful. Let's go to the dashboard. I can open the Nginx dashboard, and having that, I'm processing all the logs from the Nginx that you are visiting. I can get structured that data, and then I can do some processing and some dashboarding on top of that. So here we can see everything that you have been trying to do with the application, like this try of hacking or something, and this voting or question submitting. And yeah, I can, using the GUIP, I can like get the origin of the request, and we can see that, yeah, Denmark for KubeCon, and there's Rick. And yeah, so this is really cool. And as I'm using, they are evicting me from the room. So I have to be quick. Okay. So as I have this metadata, I can, for instance, say, hey, I want to get information only from one of the Nginx. So I can go and say only this Nginx. Sorry, it's up, I think. Demo. Oh, sorry, I don't remember the name of the bot that is running the application. So I think we are not doing this. But yeah, but the idea is that using metadata, you could focus only in one of the applications that are answering your request instead of having the whole thing. This is where metadata is cool. let's see now how a metric bit works. Same thing, I have all the configuration here. This time is bigger because I'm enable some modules. This one is to monitor the system. I'm also monitoring Docker. I'm monitoring Kubernetes. And then I use Autodiscover in the same way. I enable the hints-based Autodiscover, but I'm also using a template in this case to show how it goes. So in this case, I want to use a template, and if I detect that a container is running MySQL, I launch the MySQL module, and I have in an environment variable the password to contact that MySQL, for instance. Then in my application, I have used some labels to tell metric bit how to monitor it. In this case, again, I'm saying, hey, launch the Nginx module for this container, and I want you to use this host. I'm not redeploying this because we are in a little hurry. So let's go directly to the dashboard. You have to trust me on this one. So MySQL, metric bits, overview. This one doesn't seem to be working. I'm not sure it's deployed now. Let me check with the other one. Metric bit, Nginx. Yeah, okay, we got metrics for this one. So basically, metric bit detected that these Nginx annotations and launched the module to it for it, and we got all this information from it, which is cool. I didn't need to go back to the configuration. So think about it. If you want to launch a new service, for instance, a new team is wanting to deploy a new application, they only need to read the documentation on how the annotations work, and metric bit will automatically launch the module for it without restarting, without reconfiguring. And yeah, this is everything I wanted to show. I think we can go into some of the questions, if you will. I see one that's interesting. What's my window manager? It's called i3, and yeah, everything is managed by the keyboard. It's what's called a tiling Windows manager. You can check it out, i3. Yeah, and you have any other question around?
Questions, guys?
I probably have something like 2 minutes.
Yep. Okay.
Are the dashboards and maybe alerts created automatically when you use a module?
The dashboards are created automatically. So both FileBit and MetricBit have a command to set up the dashboard for you. The command is actually called setup. So if you do FileBit setup, it will contact Kibara and deploy all the dashboards for you. We don't have anything for alerts, but it makes all the sense. So it's an interesting point.